I'm going to start with, for those who don't know, a little bit about what is scleroderma. And I think it's really interesting as one of the difficult or different, autoimmune conditions out there. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of run through a little bit of, what is scleroderma, a bit about Scleroderma Australia, a little bit about my journey with scleroderma as well, and then all the awareness campaigns that we do and how people can get involved in that as well. And then, of course, lots of questions. So very open to that. But if you do want to pop that up, I'll pop it up on my screen. And I'm just curious as to how much people already know. And do people know why we use the sunflower as our logo? So basically the sunflower, it always turns towards the sun. So basically, as the flower grows and the petals start to come out, it will always turn towards the sun. So with people with scleroderma feeling the cold so much, we use the sunflower as our logo because that's what we as individuals prefer to do. We prefer to turn towards the sun and be in warm climates. So scleroderma or systemic sclerosis is a chronic connective tissue condition. So it's obviously an autoimmune rheumatic condition as well. So one of the common symptoms is about thickening or hardening of the skin. And it comes from the Greek word sclero, meaning hard, and derma, meaning skin. So it's quite an interesting one where, the impacts of scleroderma can be quite diverse. Every single two patients are different, like no one is the same. And it's really interesting that we roughly know that there's about 6,000 Australians with scleroderma. We do think that this is probably a higher number, but it's one of those complicated scenarios of data collection across the medical industry here in Australia that we really haven't been able to really focus on the full true scope of the people that have scleroderma within this country. We are going to be working on some projects to actually fix that coming up in the next 18 months. So it'll be really interesting to see if there really is a difference between that number of approximately 6,000 or whether that number is higher up. If we go by the global statistics around the world, you would think that per capita, based on what other countries have, our number should definitely be around 10 to 12,000. But unfortunately, just because the complications of the condition itself, where not everyone sees a rheumatologist, some people might see a gastroenterologist, some might see a lung specialist, we can't actually gather that information properly in order to know the true figure. So as I said before, it causes the thickening and hardening of bodily tissues and often causes serious life-threatening damage. So your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your esophagus, your gastrointestinal tract are all involved in regards to scleroderma. Women are 3 to 4 times more likely to develop the condition than men, but it's an interesting one that we do know and understand that with men that get scleroderma, unfortunately, their condition generally is actually worse than females. So the progression becomes a lot quicker and they get a lot more severe complications, especially around with lung disease as well. And I'm not sure if anyone's really kind of paid attention to the news of late, probably the last 18 months or so. We've had a lot of exposure around silicosis and exposure to stonemasonry. So the increase of men with scleroderma has actually come up quite significant. So there's been this connection between silica dust in the masonry industry with hard stone and, developing bench tops and all the like, and men not working in safe work environments and therefore increasing the number of men with scleroderma. And again, although the condition can present at any stage, usually it's between the ages of 25 and 55 where it comes as an onset. So interesting, that leads me a little bit into about what Scleroderma Australia does. So Scleroderma Australia was formed in 2005. We basically are a national organisation, but we have the state associations that kind of sit underneath us as well. So basically we do the high level stuff, and whereas, Scleroderma Victoria, Scleroderma Queensland and Scleroderma New South Wales will kind of more do sort of like the on the ground advocacy and support groups and those sorts of things. I'm going to stop and pause for a second. I'd really love to know and understand if anybody has any questions. It is a bit of a combination. I've got a very big multidisciplinary team. So for me, I've got rheumatology, dermatology, and a respiratory specialist. So I've got 3 in my little cohort. Rheumatology takes the lead for me. And then we kind of coordinate things through. I still see the other doctors quite separately. But I do know for a fact, like, one of my committee members and other people, they have more of gastrointestinal issues. So basically they'll see a gastroenterologist, and, there's other respiratory and lung function areas that with different specialties that go through with PAH, ILD. So it depends on what symptoms you actually get, because they are quite broad. And I will say I am quite lucky with my multidisciplinary team. They do meet together, which I think is probably a rarity in Australia's health system. But they do meet quite often together to speak about my treatment, or if there's any issues from that perspective. But yeah, it can be quite complex, from a multidisciplinary perspective as well. But good question. So under the Australian Scleroderma Interest Group, they're basically our research team. So they kind of lead the major projects and do lots of education around scleroderma for us. So that's again, a multidisciplinary team of professors, and, we've got rheumatologists, we've got respiratory, we've got dermatology, again, the Australian Scleroderma Interest Group. So what they have is they have across the country, we have centres of excellence. And within these centres of excellence, what they've got is a scleroderma nurse, which is actually embedded into the clinic. But not only does this specialist nurse, coordinate things like all of your blood tests or your respiratory tests or whatever it might be, they actually assist and collect data, which is more from a life history perspective for their Australian scleroderma cohort study. So we've been collecting that data for about 15 years, and that is all around that, where did you grow up? What were you exposed to as a child? What type of work have you done in the past? Things about, the relationship. So it's kind of more around, collecting data to see if there's any linkages from a research perspective around commonalities. So yes, we have pretty much a centre of excellence in every state except for Northern Territory. We in Australia haven't captured that, unfortunately. Again, that's one of the data pieces that we are missing. And hopefully, when we start to do our little data project within the next 18 months, we'll be able to pick that up. For me, it was skin issues. For another person on my committee, and somebody that I'm quite close to, was gastrointestinal issues. And another person was around respiratory. So again, it's that really complicated scenario where it can take up to 2 years to get diagnosed, for that simple reason that you have so many different types of symptoms that the condition might start with. And therefore, people are kind of running around in circles thinking that it's another, masking as another condition. Therefore, it isn't until they do the specifics around either SCL70 or, your positive ANA antibodies, to kind of narrow it down. These are the tests that we're, advocating for, that GPs do more regularly. Therefore, hopefully we can get a little bit of a quicker diagnosis. But yeah, it's interesting. It's again, as I said, no two are the same with the condition as well as diagnosis. Yeah, generally, and again, no two people are the same, but mostly it will happen around with the extremities.
Mm,
So it might be, and again, it's kind of, I think it's a on or linkage that, Raynaud's is attached
yeah, yeah.
around that. So it's usually around the extremities.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think from a lifespan perspective, again, it depends on the severity where it starts off. So um, things like PAH, which can be quite serious, so pulmonary arterial hypertension, can be quite serious within scleroderma. So it's again one of those things. If it's caught early enough, then treatment is available, and therefore morbidity is lessened from that perspective. If it's not caught early enough and the treatment isn't started until it's progressed, unfortunately, it is very, very, very life-threatening. I think PAH and kidney disease are probably the two most severe ones in regards to morbidity. But thinking about that, we really try and get people diagnosed as quick as possible, therefore. And we have those regular tests. So even if you get diagnosed, there are yearly tests that happen. And we're very, very pleased that in the past 2 years, we've done some great advocacy around, now I have to say this slowly, NT-proBNP blood test. It's been around for a while, but basically on a yearly basis, people with scleroderma will go and have a lung function test and an echocardiograph, just to double check around your right heart and making sure that everything's okay for early diagnosis for PAH. So now, instead of doing all of those laborious tests, we have access as at 1st of July, which is only a week or so away, to this blood test called NT-proBNP, which is available for early detection and also progression. So even if you have PAH, this blood test can actually keep a track around your diagnosis of PAH and whether or not, the current drugs that you're on are working properly, and a little bit better management around that as well. It's an interesting one. So all of our state associations, plus our national one, we're all volunteers. So we have the beautiful Cheryl, who lives in WA, and she's been trying her hardest for the past 18 months to start up a state association. So she's looking for volunteers. So if you're keen to participate, please reach out to me. I'm very, very, very happy to connect. And Cheryl runs support groups within Perth. So she alternates between North and South Perth in between doing those support groups. But I think from the perspective, like Fiona Stanley Hospital is where the scleroderma nurse is in the ASIC Centre is situated. So we try and get people connected into that hospital as much as we can. It is a vast state, and I think, again, it's one of those challenges around a very remote, a remote state where a lot of people are very, very sparsed out. And I think that makes it really difficult for connection. But as I said, Cheryl's been really, really trying her hardest to set up a state association in WA, but just needs a bit of extra people on the ground over there. Yeah, well, interesting. As noted before, when Charmaine asked the question about race, it's not something that we've actually really captured over the years, and we, as the chair of the board, and also at events and things like that, from that perspective, we are not aware of any one single solitary person that is Indigenous with scleroderma. So again, that's on our list of our plans moving forward around our data collection and outreach. So hopefully come back to me in 12 months' time and I might have an answer for you. This is kind of, where I wanted to kind of jump in around a little bit of my story. And, it's one of those interesting ones where I was diagnosed quite young, so I'm one of those anomalies that, very rare from the state of me getting diagnosed age 11. And again, that was more started off as a skin issue, and it took again 2.5, 3 years for me to actually get diagnosed. It was an interesting journey, that starting off with an invisible disability. Like when I reflect back now on my journey and around, what I do for my work, what I do for, my advocacy and all that stuff around people with disability, that kind of, connection between physical and non-visible disability, I think has been quite interesting. And I always do like to reflect on it. So being quite young and diagnosed with scleroderma, I think, it was quite an isolating experience. There was the Scleroderma Victoria Foundation, where I did get connected to at a young age, and was going to some of the support group meetings, along with my mum. But a lot of people kept dying. It was extremely confronting at age 14, 15 to have these people around me. So I kind of, wiped my hands and kind of moved on and didn't really get involved that much with the association. But for me, that isolating journey, and when I got into my 20s, I was just like, right, well, all of this has happened. Now I have to live with scleroderma, and therefore I'll just, journey on and continue my way. And it wasn't until I got to probably around my late 20s to early 30s, my skin started to really play up yet again, and it was quite thick, it was quite hard. And any time that I kind of, knocked or bumped or anything from that perspective, the skin would split like pretty much like wide open. Constantly, that merry-go-round of infections, skin grafts, hospitalizations, and on this like merry-go-round for quite some time. So I get to like my to about age 30, and had quite a severe ulcer, and it wasn't healing, and that turned out to be squamous cell carcinoma, so a type of cancer. And that was quite an interesting one, where they ended up having to do quite a significant surgery. So they basically had to cut out the cancer within my foot and then do a muscle flap from my back. So basically take a piece of muscle out of my back and then graft it to my foot so that I could still use my foot. And in reflection, that was a very horrific surgery. That was quite debilitating. I had to take at least 8 months off work in order to recover. The pain was excruciating. I ended up bleeding internally whilst I was in hospital as well. So almost lost my life. So that was quite a traumatic experience. But getting past all of that, a few years down the track again, in my opposite leg, I got another squamous cell carcinoma. We went around on a merry-go-round again, repeatedly getting these cancers removed. And then it was quite interesting that it got to a significant point once again, and they approached me and said, look, again, this cancer's got quite close to the bone. Your choice is you can do another muscle flap, so we'll take it from the other side this time, or we can amputate your leg. No surprise which one I went for. I definitely went for the leg amputation. And I will say, I thought it was very life-changing for me. I found it, I suppose, almost liberating. And I think that reflection, again, going back to that visible and non-visible disability, it just created a little bit more of an opportunity for me, for people to make adjustments or understand a little bit more. Like if I wasn't attending an event, or I wanted to stay at home because I was tired or my leg was hurting, all that kind of stuff, it just kind of did actually open up a little bit and made it a little bit easier for myself. We carry on a few more years down the track, and I had another squamous cell carcinoma pop up in my foot. And I do remember this quite quite significantly. It was a Wednesday, and I saw the plastic surgeon, whom I got to know quite well, obviously. And I approached him and just sort of said, you know what, Michael, I said, I think I'm ready for the other leg to go. And he said, okay. He walked out of his office, he came back in, and he said, I'll do it Friday. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm ready, but I'm not that ready. So basically, a few weeks later, I had my second leg amputated. I had to, organize things with work. I had to actually tell my family, which I hadn't done yet, get all of those things in order, and then have amputation number 2. It was really interesting, the conversation that I had with my family about making that decision. They questioned in regards to, why didn't I, tell them that I was contemplating it to start with. And then my dad was curious in saying that, you should have done it years ago. And I will say, I'm now a double amputee with both of my legs gone. And I reflect back in life, and I actually wish I'd done it sooner. Yeah. So here I am today as a double amputee living with scleroderma. The scleroderma aspect of things is reasonably under control, on immune suppressants like we all are. But here I am as a double amputee, which actually has allowed me to become a really good, strong disability advocate, learning and understanding around disability from a really large perspective, and working with different types of disability. And this is where it led me to where I am today. That's pretty much about my journey, but I will absolutely take as many questions as possible. Yeah, it's more of one of the types of skin cancers, so it can actually show up anywhere. I did have a one on my back at one point, which was completely random. Don't know where and how that kind of came up from, but yeah, it can actually happen anywhere in your body. But it is more, of a skin-related one, but it can go quite deep into the tissue.
Can I just throw in, as a medical person, any of us, and it's everyone on the screen, I think, who is on an immune suppressant for their autoimmune condition of one sort or another, we are all prone to developing different types of skin cancers. So I know in Australia, you already pay such attention. You've got skin clinics, I think, for melanomas where you can go get checked. But even in North America, where we don't quite have that incidence, it's important for everyone to have skin checks quite regularly if we're on the medications that we are on. Just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you, Charmaine. Absolutely, 100%. And we do it quite well here in Australia. Well, I feel I've been lucky in regards to my relationship with my dermatologist. Yeah, we're big borrowers, very, very big borrowers. Look, yeah, I think from the Australian Scleroderma Interest Group's perspective, there's lots of things happening at the moment. What they generally do, because it's so complicated from, a systemic way, they're more targeting with drugs that treat a symptom. So whether that be the PAH, whether that be the kidneys, whether that be the gastrointestinal tract. So they're not actually really doing anything for scleroderma as a whole. It's symptomatic in regards to what drugs we take around what part of our body it is affecting the most. So I think we're a long way off in getting something that's specific for scleroderma itself. But, I think the crossover with so many autoimmune conditions, I think, yeah, we're always going to be borrowing and sharing, I think, for quite some time. That whole journey and that whole piece of getting the legs amputated, it actually meant a better quality of life for me. And I think that's where I attach that to. Previously, before my legs were amputated, I was in hospital so much, it was infection, antibiotics, I'd be on IV antibiotics for something like 11 months out of a year. And, that quality of life wasn't there. I couldn't go swimming. I couldn't wear normal shoes. There was so many limitations. I couldn't wear dresses. I couldn't wear skirts. Always had to wear pants just to hide up those ulcers and what have you. So getting the legs amputated was almost like a sense of freedom. It allowed me, I could go swimming in a swimming pool. I learned to swim again as an amputee, which is very hard to refine your center of gravity, but it was a good challenge to take. But yeah, those sorts of things where I could buy off the shelf shoes, I could wear shorts and skirts and actually, have pretty toenails and, nice prostheses that actually looked really good. Whereas beforehand, I was limited. I'd be in summer and be panting and hot because I'd have to wear jeans or long pants and those sorts of things about covering up. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but yeah, that liberation, I think, from that journey with an invisible disability to now it becoming physical, but physical in such a positive way that gave me so many benefits. I hope that makes sense. I've got a slogan that people can start using. It's really, really simple. Ask, listen, and act. Doesn't matter what the scenario might be. If you're tempted to provide support or ask a question about, a person with disability, whether it might be, helping them with stairs or a door or a ramp or, whatever the scenario might be, or approaching them. So you ask the question, do you need help? You listen for their instructions, because that's really, really important. And I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute where people have actually mucked that up. And then after that, then you act on what they've said, which I think is, really important. So I've had a couple of scenarios where, I've been using my wheelchair. I do have prostheses as well, but again, as people can appreciate, someone with an autoimmune condition, fatigue, walking around on your prostheses all the time can be quite tiring. So I've got to balance, my fatigue out and sometimes use my wheelchair and sometimes use my prostheses. So there was this time where I was in my wheelchair and, we get to a set of traffic lights and somebody said, oh, can I assist you? And I said, yes, please. I said, if you can hold on to me and just, move across and we'll hit the light to press the button. So unfortunately, they didn't listen to my instructions and they let go of my wheelchair without telling me. And I rolled down into traffic and almost got hit by a car. So that listen bit in the middle, ask, listen, and act, always make sure that you listen to the instructions. That's my best advice that I can give you. I hope that helps. Look, I think there's 2 points out of that. I think one of those is, it depends on the supports that you have around you. And I do feel extremely lucky around all of the great people that I have in my life, and I always know that there's support there if I need it. Not everybody is fortunate to have that, and I think, for me, that is an absolute sense of gratitude. And I do feel extremely grateful with everything that's gone on. I've always had that from a positive perspective. I think the other point is that I was always brought up with what I call the 24-hour rule. So the 24-hour rule for me is that whatever the problem is, whatever the issue is, you have 24 hours to feel upset about it, reflect, and then decide, can I change it? If you can change it, then go ahead and do something about it. But if you can't, move on, because there's no point in dragging excess baggage along with you. And I think it's really important for people to, it's not an easy one to learn. I was lucky enough to be brought up with that as a motto as such. But yeah, I think that 24-hour rule is what I live by. And I think that's what keeps me happy. No, I would say more so it's something with an environmental factor that's kind of, triggered something around with scleroderma. Yeah, that's not been a conversation that's been common in our environment, no. There's nothing confirmed, but we do know that there's pockets of people that have been exposed to any type of mining environments. Like even if you look at me, I grew up in Latrobe Valley here in Victoria, which of course is the open cut. A lot of people have been in industries where mining has been very, very common around them, whether they've spent some time around it or a significant amount of time around it. That has also been a bit of a common denominator as well. I've got just a couple of things left I just want to bring up. So we've got World Scleroderma Day coming up. Just a little bit about that out of just curiosity and interest. So basically, June 29, 1940, a talented Swiss-German artist, Paul Klee, died of scleroderma. And then that was acknowledged then moving forward that World Scleroderma Day was on June 29. So we've got that next week, which is coming up. And we've got a few little bits and pieces that we're running up. So we've got a Snuggle Up for Scleroderma campaign. So we're encouraging people to, hold their own slumber party in their favorite PJs, either in real life or online, a film night, afternoon tea wearing your favorite gloves and scarves, casual clothes days at work, and those sorts of things as well, just so that people can start to snuggle up. Out of curiosity, just to let you know, we do have a second awareness day that we run. And this year was the first time ever that we actually did this, and we created on March the 6th. And that is because obviously people with scleroderma themselves couldn't actually go out in winter or participate in any event. So we decided, you know what, we need something in warmer weather where people with scleroderma themselves can actually get out there and participate. And I will say that I'm absolutely so proud. We've had the highest engagement from people with scleroderma in my whole 10 years of being on the board. So I was really excited when we did this day. We didn't raise as much funds as we wanted to, but that day for us was all about getting people with scleroderma involved, and very excited that actually happened. And that's probably it from me.